We also talk about accounts receivable ratio last week as well. So here we are going to talk about the performance of the company based on inventory. And what exactly we are going to do is we are going to talk about a ratio called inventory turnover. So that is how fast you are able to sell your inventory. The logic is the same as last class, which is the accounts receivable turnover. Remember, accounts receivable turnover measures how fast the company is able to get the cash back from the customers. So the higher the number, the better the company is. And here the logic is the same, how fast the company is able to sell the inventory. Okay. So usually the higher the number is, the better once again, because that means you're able to sell the inventory faster. Okay. The faster you sell your inventory, the more profit that you can get. Okay. So what you're going to do is you're going to take cost of goods sold divided by the average inventory. Okay, so for example, an inventory turnover ratio of 3, so that is cost of the goods sold is 3 times higher than the average inventory. What that means is you are selling your inventory 3 times per year. Okay, so that is a better number than 2 times per year, but that is a worse number than, say, 10 times per year. Okay. But the higher the number, the better it is. It's only a rough estimate. You really have to look into other ratios as well. Why is that the case? Is because even though a company is able to sell, for example, 10 times per year, it doesn't mean that it's a profitable company. Usually it is, but not all the case, not always, because sometimes you are just lowering your price to sell the inventory. Or essentially you are just selling your inventory to everyone in the world, even to those with a very, very poor credit history. So even though you have the sales revenue, but it doesn't mean that you can collect the cash. Okay? So this ratio must be used with other ratios such as the profitability of the ratio, profit margin, as well as the accounts receivable turnover. So if you use these 3 ratios together, you can see how much profit you are making based on the profit margin ratio. You can see how fast you are selling the inventory based on this ratio here. And then you can see how fast you are getting the cash from the customers based on the accounts receivable turnover. Okay, so that we can ensure the company is not just selling inventory to anyone, even with poor credit history, or at a very, very low price. Okay, so this is how we are going to use the ratios. And on top of that, we can actually convert this ratio into another ratio, or maybe a number this time. And this is called the number of days inventory is held before inventory is sold. So basically it's the same ratio as the inventory turnover, but we are just converting that into the number of days. So for example, if you're selling inventory 3 times per year, you can take 365 and then divide it by 3. So roughly that's going to give you 122 days. So what exactly does it mean by 122 days is it takes you about 4 months to sell the inventory. Okay, so the meaning is the same as an inventory ratio of 3, inventory turnover of 3, but it really depends on which one you want to use. Okay, any questions regarding, yes?
How do you determine the average inventory?
Average inventory is just how much you have at the beginning of the month, and then how much you have at the end of the month. So you take the beginning plus the end, and then divide it by 2. So a simple average. Anything else? And sometimes you may only have a beginning balance or the ending balance, only one, then you just take one. Yeah. If you're not given both. Yes.
How's the 60% cost to sales ratio estimated?
Oh, that is set by the company. So usually when you sell products, you want to have a particular markup. So for example, if you purchase the goods at $60, then your plan is to sell it at $90. So the markup is set by you, and then you can use that to determine what is the cost to sales ratio. Anything else you want to ask regarding chapter 7? Okay, so now let's talk about the midterm. So first of all, I have posted the extra office hours on WebCT. Okay, so you can take a look at the extra office hours, and they are on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, along with the regular office hours, a total of 12 hours. So if you have any questions, make sure you make use of the office hours. You can go to any office hours you want. Okay, it doesn't have to be your own PA's office hours. Anyone is fine. And if you want, you can also email us, and then we will be happy to answer your questions by email. Okay. So on top of that, I have also posted a sample midterm, which comes from Anne McDonald, which is the day class going to be section instructor. Okay, so the main idea here is not to, or to put it this way, is only to give you an idea of how the questions look like and how the format of the exam look like. Okay, it doesn't mean that those questions will be exactly the same as what you're going to see on the midterm. Okay, it's only the format of the question as well as the structure, I would say. So as you can see on the sample midterm, it contains 20 multiple choices. And even though it only contains one short answer, but there should be 2 and then 2 calculation questions. But your midterm will be a little bit different. Instead of 20 multiple choices, you only have 15 multiple choices. Okay, 15 multiple choices, 2 short answer questions. And then there will be 3 calculation questions. So what that means is I'm going to move the 5 multiple choices to another shorter calculation question. Okay, so roughly, the length will be pretty much the same as the sample midterm, but make sure you remember the sample midterm only has 1 short answer question, but there should be 2. Okay, so when you practice or when you study for the midterm, the most important thing is make sure you know what you're doing so that you can practice for the speed. It doesn't mean that the exam is a long exam, but it's just that you have to know what you're doing in order to finish the exam, I would say, on time. Because if you don't know what you're doing, then maybe even for the journal entries, you would take 1 hour to do the journal entries and then things like that. Okay, so make sure you study for the exam, your lecture notes, read the textbook, your assignment questions, tutorial questions, so that you know how to deal with all the question types. And whenever you see the question on the exam, then you know exactly what to do, so that you won't have to waste time figuring out what to do on the exams. And then for the theory questions, as I said last time, one of them will be revenue recognition criteria question that we have done in chapter 4. So it's very similar to what you have done in the tutorial or assignment questions. You will be given a scenario, a very short scenario, and then you will have to say, answer the questions like when to recognize revenue and things like that. Okay, and the other short answer question will be something else that we have talked about. Okay, but I'm not going to talk about what that is. And for calculation questions, obviously there will be journal entries. Okay, and there will be accounting cycle questions, but not the entire accounting cycle. Okay, you don't have to do the entire accounting cycle because that's going to take you forever to do. Okay, so most likely if there is an accounting cycle question, I will only ask you to do a partial balance sheet, partial income statement, or just to ask you to calculate the net income and something else and things like that. So not the entire thing, but you should know how to deal with the entire thing in case you are only being asked a part of it. Okay. And you should also know all the questions that we talked about in class and in tutorials. For example, percentage of completion methods. In chapter 6, we have bad debt expense, we have temporary investment, we have bank reconciliation. So any calculations that we talked about in class. So that would be, because there would be 3 calculation questions on the midterm exam, so you would expect that there would be something else rather than just journal entries and your accounting cycle question. And also, don't forget that we also talked about the ratios. Okay, so make sure you know how to calculate the ratios. The main idea is not a very hard calculation. It's rather asking you to simply calculate the ratio and then know when to use the ratio. Okay, so what that means is you may not be asked to calculate an exact ratio, but I will ask you something like evaluate, say, how well the company collects the cash, and then which ratio you're going to use and calculate something like that. Okay, so it's a little bit harder than just directly asking you to calculate a particular ratio, because in this case you have to know what that ratio is for. Okay, so make sure you know the ratios that we have talked about in class. Not that many, I think only 7, 8, or 9 ratios that we talked about in class. Okay, and then you have to know which one you use. Multiple choice is going to be similar to the sample midterm multiple choices. There will be 4 choices for each question. And there will be short answer questions and calculation questions within the multiple choices. So overall, I think the midterm is out of 100 marks. 100 marks for, it's the same as your sample midterm. So 100 marks, and you have 110 minutes. Okay, so 12:30 to 2:20. I cannot give you extra time because there is a class right after this class. So we must go by the end of the class. So it's roughly 1 mark per minute with an extra 10 minutes for you to go over the answers and things like that. So whenever you do a practice, aim for 1 mark per minute. Yes? Tutorial next week? No, there will not be tutorial next week. Okay, no assignment due next week, no tutorial presentation next week, no tutorials next week. So all you have to come next week is come here, prepare, and then do the midterm exam. And then that will be your midterm exam. And yes?
I forget.
Pardon me? Yes, there is a holiday after the midterm. Okay, so July 2nd is a holiday. Okay, so you don't have to come the week after the midterm. And anything else you want to know about the midterm? Yes, calculator. Yeah, you can bring a calculator. Okay, any calculator is fine, but don't share a calculator with your classmates.